will the contractors need recertification of their EPA license?
Okay, this is as of now, your 608 is your 608 and your 609 is your 609. There's no recertification necessary at this time. However, under section H, subsection H of the AIM Act, they are taking comment right now on whether or not they should require some kind of a flammability training 2, 2L, and 3, and certification. So it's open for comment right now. They're seeking comment on whether they should do it, and if so, how should it be done. So it is on their mind. It is something they are considering moving forward, but it will not be under 608 or 609. That's under the Clean Air Act, which is an environmental bill, and this would be under subsection H, which is safety. It's to ensure technician and end user safety.
Are all state codes ready for A2L's refrigerants?
So the short answer is no. And to bridge that gap, AHRI, as well as several NGOs, have been working hard to adopt and push through some legislation. And essentially that legislation says that if the EPA approves a substitute, that the state building codes cannot prohibit that. So that stopgap is in place in most of the states. I believe there's 5 or 6 that we're still working on. But in reality, the building codes in several states have not been updated yet. So we are just counting on that legislation to help bridge that gap.
R32 discharge temperatures compared to R454B. What are the differences in discharge temperature between the two?
All else being equal, so the same conditions, R32 will have a slightly elevated discharge temperature compared to 454B.
Okay, excellent. And I'd like to add to that the R32 compressors from Copeland are different than the 454B compressors from Copeland. And there was engineering done to address the higher discharge temperatures. So the wear and life of the compressors will have no, if you will, impact to longevity. Or at least that's a design of those two compressors. So with that, Jason, will sensors for A2L, will they have a lifespan, or will they need to be replaced or changed out over time?
Okay, so yeah, they will. They're designed, again, they have to meet UL specifications, specifically 2-40, and they're required to self-diagnose or self-test, depending on the installation, but they will test themselves. And if it doesn't pass its little self-test, it will send the error code, go into a kind of a lockup. But yes, they do have a lifespan.
Will 454 and R32 require different refrigerant gauges? And do you recommend having different hoses for each refrigerant?
Well, that's a really good question. From a pressure perspective, 454B and 32 are pretty similar in pressures. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of way people handle gauges, but one way is by pressure classification. So they might have like a set of gauges for like a medium pressure refrigerant like 22 and a set of gauges for higher pressure refrigerants like 410A. So, from that regard, there's really not a difference to really justify it. I mean, if they have different oils and you're worried about cross-contamination, just making sure that you're purging the lines could be a way to use the same line set for the two of them. So it kind of really depends on feel, but I don't think it's necessarily required if you're, purging the lines to minimize cross-contamination.
Excellent. I'd like to add that all digital manifolds will have ability to update PT charts, through firmware updates, as we're going to be seeing various future refrigerants. That may be a good opportunity and time to adjust so you don't get caught in the field without the proper, if you will, manifold gauge set. So with that, I have a question for Chris Forth at Johnson Controls. Will sensors be provided by coil manufacturers and OEM manufacturers?
Yeah, that's always a good question, Tom. And the answer is the OEMs that design the equipment, be it independent coil manufacturer or an outdoor one, it must certify, meaning safety certify, the refrigerant detection system with the equipment. So whether it's an ICM or OEM, and those sensors must go on the indoor coil, right? So either or could be required to do so as part of the refrigerant detection design requirements.
Will there be new line set size diameter changes with these new refrigerants?
Yeah, good question. The answer is there is. I think the question, I'm going to make an assumption here, Tom, is that the question probably, I think, was intended to say, are new line sets required for a system change out, right? If there's an existing system, can the old line sets be reused? And in that case, the old line sets can be used, but there's some steps that ASHRAE 15.2 requires in the form of pressure test, inspection, pressure decay test. So you can't just use them carte blanche, right, and say, hey, they're good. But the other thing I'll remind, technicians of, sometimes when you're changing out systems, the new systems may require that just for performance reasons, not necessarily standards reasons. So you can't look at it just in terms of refrigerant change, but also performance wise. So.
Broadly speaking, what sort of price differential should we be seeing between the new A2L products and the current products that we see today?
Sure. Well, we have no solid pricing to date, but as an industry, we're kind of hearing that the blended price increase will be in the upper single digits.
Another question for the ESCO group, proctoring for A2L exams or even 608 exams, who does it and how?
Well, we do have online proctoring. There is a third-party proctor that you can use. A lot of the individual branch locations are set up with 608 proctors who can also be set up as low GWP proctors as well. There are a lot of different options. I would say to reach out to your local branch, and if need be, you can actually use a third-party online proctor on our website. So there are a lot of different options out there. Yeah.
There's a question regarding storage of new equipment outside, and they're talking about storage of refrigerant. If that's going to have to be outside, does that have to be outside, and does the equipment have to be outside? Maybe ESCO can address that.
There's no requirement for it to be outside. The 2024 IFC, the International Fire Code, has been published. It does allow for storage inside. There are some restrictions. There's, so many, a maximum, an MAQ, a maximum allowable quantity, with or without sprinklers, how they can be stored, racks, pallets, things like that. Where it does come into play is like, if you're a contractor and you have a locker or a room that you store refrigerant tanks in overnight, that, you can't store them in an unventilated space. You can't throw them in a locker or a closet, individual tanks. They do have to be stored in a ventilated space. But there's no requirement that it need be outside. Again, I would refer to the 2024 IFC. It lays it all out.
Right, absolutely. And I'd like to add just, contact your local fire marshal for disposition. But we believe that the, cylinder storage as well as equipment storage, within the envelope should not be an issue for most contractors as well as wholesalers. Will semi-hermetic compressors be able to be retrofitted in the factory or in the field to, if you will, 404 alternatives? And I think that's a good question for probably Andrew.
No, it's a good question, and I think I'm just gonna reframe it a little bit, just how I interpreted it. So if the question overall is around, like, if you have like an existing system, say like an existing 410A system, or the question might have asked about 404A.
404, correct.
That equipment, there are A1 non-flammable refrigerants that can be retrofit to with there are A1 non-flammable refrigerants that can be retrofit into those pieces of equipment. So 404A, for example, there's 448A, there's 449A out there. Those are approved retrofit gases. But when you get to some of the A2Ls, that is going to be for new equipment only. So 454A and C, for example, in refrigeration, that could only be used in new equipment that's specified for A2Ls. And air conditioning, 410A equipment will continue to need to be operated on 410A. And 454B or R32 equipment will be specifically designed for those flammable gases, mildly flammable gases.
Another question for you, Andrew. We're not talking, the question isn't about mixing refrigerants, but what would happen, or what concerns would there be if someone put 32 in a 454B system or vice versa?
It's a good question. The way we always like to explain it in the refrig world is when two refrigerants that really weren't intended to be mixed together are mixed together, it effectively becomes a new refrigerant blend. And that blend will have its own unique pressure-temperature relationship, meaning that measurements such as superheat and subcooling, which are so critical to making sure that the charge is proper, really can't be verified anymore when they're mixed together. So pressures and temperatures might look a little different, if they were to accidentally get mixed together. But really, the best practice you can do is if it's a 454B system, 454B is what should go in there. And if it's an R32 system, R32 should be the only refrigerant that goes in there. Accidents do happen. And overall, the changing of the pressure-temperature relationship and really not being able to verify performance would be the two biggest issues with that happening.
Okay,
Can I add on to that real quick?
Yeah.
So I would just like to add that they do use different oils, and the safety mitigation systems are going to be designed specific to the refrigerant in terms of being able to identify that lower flammability limit requirement. So really, you should only use the intended fluid in the intended system, right? So you shouldn't use a different fluid. If you don't have the right fluid, get the right fluid.
That's a really good point, Jennifer, that they pick up on the LFL. They're set to go off at a percentage of the LFL, and the different refrigerants have different LFLs. That's a good point.
Thank you for that. So there is a question that came up, which I'll take. Will we need a different reclaimer to reclaim the new refrigerant? That's a great question. The short answer is no. The current reclaimers in the market are all prepared for, if you will, these future refrigerants. But no, again, that's a great question. Larger residential system, long line set. Is there any concerns with, mitigation, and the gas being distributed throughout the house, if you will, if there is a leak?
Well, believe it or not, part of the mitigation system is to design the maximum allowable charge for that system. It's part of the mitigation. So there's charging charts and square footage or cubic volume of the installation space, and the maximum allowable charge is low enough to where even if the entire charge were to leak into that space, we would have too much air and not enough fuel to have a combustible mixture. So in the design, we spoke of mitigation as the sensor, the bore, turning the fan on, but also in the design, mitigation is restricting that charge size by the cubic volume of the installation space. And there'll be charts in the installation manual that show you, listen, this is the charge, this is the cubic volume, that sort of thing. Right. So by design, the chargers are smaller so that even if it did, there's enough air within the space to keep it below LFL.
Excellent.
That's that M2 charge that Clifton talked about earlier.
Very good. I appreciate that, Jason. And there's a question that came up. Press fittings such as ZoomLock Max and Pro Press from Mueller, are these ready for A2Ls? And the short answer is yes, but if you want to expand upon that, Jason, I'd appreciate it.
So it's going to be where allowed by code. So even though they are in the standards, When the different individual states or counties or cities adopt the codes, they may put restrictions on there. There are some cities where you can only braze even though press fittings are in the code. So it's going to come down to your local code, but they have been tested. The manufacturers have tested them for A2Ls. They are in the standards. It just comes down to your local code, whether or not they are allowable.
Excellent, thank you. So this is a question for Chris Forth. It's a little tricky here. What are the rulings on sell-through for current stock that is available either from in a contractor's warehouse or at a distributor?
Well, that's a good one. I'm going to defer that to, no, I was going to say I was going to defer that to Jennifer, but right now, the way the EPA technology transition rule is written, split systems, meaning both the indoor and outdoor, have to be installed by January 1st, 2025. However, they do allow for servicing of an existing system. So that same outdoor condenser or indoor coil or air handler can be replaced in, say, an R410A system pretty much indefinitely after that. So you can't put in both systems together, right? And you can't put in both components together and make a new system beginning 1/1/2025. First, I'll call it regular splits and so forth. But you can service existing 410A systems, replacing either the indoor or the outdoor, but not both. And that was unexpected, unfortunately, by EPA. So I can tell you that industry is working with EPA to try to get better clarity on that. But I'll just say stay tuned. Don't panic right now. We're going to hopefully get a revised ruling on that. What industry initially asked for was just a date of manufacture, meaning if it's made before 1/1/2025, there would be an indefinite sell-through, right? So we would stop production in 2024, and then as that inventory bled out, there would not be any restrictions. What EPA indicated they would likely do last October 2022 was give us a year, right? What we ended up with, again, for split systems was a date of install, which is, very difficult for the market to accommodate. So I just say we're still working with EPA on that. That rule is final, though. And right now that's the rule until there's further amendments of some sort.
Okay, excellent.
So one thing I would add to that is on package systems, they're treated differently, which also adds complexity to this rule. So package systems do have that manufacturing cutoff date of December 31st, 2024, and a 3-year sell-through period. So treated very differently under this rule, which also was not desired by industry.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Thanks for the clarity. So will R410A systems with component service needs be available, and will 410A be available in the next years? And I'm going to take that. The answer is 410A will be available. The 410A components will be available. If there's a need for a full coil, indoor coil change, you may see that a new coil may have a sensor, but you won't be required to wire the sensor, as it's a 410A system. But again, thank you for that question. And this is a question for Andrew. Can you quickly go through the R454A and 450 and R454C, just their applications?
Yeah, sure. So 454A, it has a GWP around 250. So it's used in applications that really are allowed a product with the 300 GWP or less, which you're going to mostly find to be things like condensing units for supermarkets or cold storage. The SNAP Rule 26 is still being finalized, but the intent of that is going to be that 454A is going to be used for systems that really can use under 200 pounds of refrigerant and 300 GWP. The reason it's worth going through the additional hoops for 454A is you're going to find that performance-wise, it's really the closest performance match to like a 448, 449, 404A condensing unit. 454C has a GWP under 150, so you see in a lot of applications, so whether it be standalone equipment, food dispensing, supermarket systems, anything that really requires 150 GWP or less. For low and medium temperature refrigeration applications, 454C is really going to be the ideal refrigerant for those applications.
Can we replace outdoor units if they go bad with 410A after January 1st, 2025?
The answer is yes, you can, right?
Right.
What you can't do is replace both the indoor and the outdoor at the same time. EPA's got a frequent questions document that specifies it's actually acceptable to replace either the indoor or the outdoor at different times, but not at the same time. They don't specify the timing difference between when that indoor or outdoor can be replaced. They just stipulate it can't be done together.
And this is a general question we'll start with Chris, and this is just not an OEM specific, but is there any rulings, or do you believe that dry 410A units will be available in the near future?
Yeah, in the EPA documents, the frequent question documents, they do not have an issue with a replacement condenser being dry, fully charged, or even partially charged. It doesn't make any difference to EPA if that was supplied, as a replacement component in an existing system. Whether the market will do that, remains to be determined. There could be other factors there. But I would emphasize let's kind of hold tight here for a little while and see what things work out with EPA, because that could change.
Another one for the group. Will the new equipment have straight copper and not swedge fittings to accommodate press and brazing?
I really don't have any insight on what the manufacturer's intentions are. I haven't seen, whether they came swedged already, if they're coming straight piece for the press. Some manufacturers were doing that with some of the 410A stuff. I don't know if that's going to be their intention with their R32 stuff or R454B stuff or not.
I know that there's at least one OEM that their indoor equipment, coil air handler will be, if you will, straight copper. But I can't speak for the industry. Another one for Andrew, pretty straightforward. What refrigerants are we most likely to see in residential and light commercial air conditioning after R410A?
Great question. The two main refrigerants are going to be R454B and R32.
There's a question about distributors being impacted with storage of A2L refrigerants. I can't speak for the industry, but specific to Johnstone Supply, we will be able to supply the industry with ample refrigerant based upon your needs as we do today. Will the mitigation have an industry standard set point, or will it depend upon the manufacturer?
Hey, Tom, thank you for asking. This is a great question. And it's going to depend a little bit by manufacturer and even more importantly by product type. There are different mitigation requirements depending on whether it's kind of a commercial system or a residential system, the size of the equipment, the location of the room. So I can't give, a specific answer, but it will be laid out within the product specifications. So whatever, equipment you're buying or using, there will be details on that mitigation system specific to its application and product type associated with it.
Will the equipment size change? Will the outdoor system become larger in the new redesign for these A2L refrigerants?
Yeah, another good question. And for the most part, no. Equipment footprints are going to be very comparable to what we have today. Again, most of the changes are related to the actual handling of, how to be safe with refrigerant, and those are pretty small systems there.
for Derek at the Johnstone service team. Where can I get the latest updates on A2L equipment rollouts, etc.?
So yeah, thanks, Tom. So HVAC Answers is always going to be kind of that first line of defense in terms of general information for industry and regulations. In terms of specific manufacturer information, that information is still in process from the manufacturers. A lot of OEMs are still in the process of identifying when exactly they're going to do their product launches, but we will have that information on johnstonesupply.com within the website as that information rolls out. So start to look for that in the first quarter of next year.
You know, with the phase down of HFCs, how long will 410A and 404 be available?
From a refrigerant perspective, when looking at 410A specifically, there's no retrofit gas. So again, looking back at, say, the R22 days, there was a number of different gases that could be retrofitted into, an R22 air conditioning unit. You're not seeing that with 410A for a variety of reasons around capacity mostly. So, I think 410A will be a piece of the current installed base for sure. And really the way they're transitioning away from it is with new equipment. Reclaim is something else that's also going to play a big role in the future. So, understanding that piece of it and how reclaim is going to play into like 410A supply is something that I think over the next couple of years, we're going to get a better sense of in the industry. The question also asked about 404A. 404A, much like R22, has retrofit gases available. So if you work with 404A today, likely, if needed, that could be retrofitted to another product. And then likewise, there's new equipment that could be installed that with 404A, similar capacities, efficiencies.
What are the requirements as far as transportation and storage? And some guidance around the quantities and volume around storage for both vehicle and shop.
All right. So for the vehicle under materials of the trade, up to now, it's 440 pounds. Anything more than that, and you're not a service van, you're a shipper. That's pretty much what's been allowed by DOT for the trades to drive around with we drive around with oxygen, acetylene already. So not in one container, obviously, but the total aggregate number of pounds of gases, if you will, or cubic, is 440 pounds. For storage, there are storage requirements laid out in the 2024 IFC. And again, it's going to come down to local fire code as well as where they're at in adoption of those standards for the 2024 IFC. So there are new storage requirements for the 2Ls. We can drive around with them in our truck. We drive around with A3s already. And the limit on that is current limit on that is 440 pounds.
Will the units come pre-charged since they are semi-flammable?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Again, probably going to depend, but in most cases, yeah, there's really very little risk with pre-charging equipment for like a condenser, for example. And there have been steps taken by the industry to allow the use and the shipping of charged equipment. So whether it's a package system or a split system with a nominal charge inside of it, those have been allowed and granted exemptions to the Department of Transportation. So there's pretty low risk associated with that, and we've taken the steps needed to mitigate any of the risk that is associated.
If a unit's confined within a closet or an area with a gas water heater, are there, what are the concerns with this type of, if you will, installation?
Well, I think the primary concern there would be, again, if there's a leak and possible ignition sources, but we are talking about the indoor component here that will have the leak detector, the leak sensor, the mitigation, whatever it happens to be. There are going to be requirements for installation that are laid out in the ASHRAE standards 15 and 15.2 for what's considered a confined space. what is allowable in the cubic volume or the shell. Is it ducted? Is it ductless? But there will be requirements for the installation space. Can this system be used in this space? Yes or no? And there'll be charts in the installation manual. It says, listen, this is your required cubic volume or your square footage for this size unit or this size of a charge. But yes, there are limitations to, again, a closet install or a confined space install.
Will there be coil only ratings, and can we use existing furnaces?
I wish I had a known answer for that one yet. In theory, they're still allowed, but in practice, just because of the changes to the building codes, it's likely going to be more challenging. Where the rated equipment itself is going to need to be safe from both an indoor and an outdoor unit perspective. So I can't necessarily give a concrete answer yet. My guess is there might still be some. But it's going to be probably less likely than it is now. So no real answer yet, TBD, unfortunately, until we get kind of final confirmation from all states on where the codes are going and what the final kind of allowance is for some of those non-matched coil systems.
If a contractor is using A2Ls, will this impact their insurance policy for their business and their business operation?
As of right now, we haven't seen any indication from the insurance consortium at large that they're going to up your rates or something, so to speak. But I can tell you that when they put A2Ls in your car, the YF, your car insurance didn't necessarily go up. And when we bought that new refrigerator that had 600A, our homeowner's insurance didn't necessarily go up. I can't predict the future, but as of right now, there's no indication from the insurance consortium that they plan on raising your rates because you're working with A2Ls. There are a lot of contractors that are working with A3s right now that can comment to this to say, listen, just because I work in refrigeration and I'm working with A3s, they didn't go overboard on that.
I'm going to go with the ESCO team on this. How do you stop a leaking system? Is it safe to work on it, or do we let the A2L leak out before we start working on the system?
I would recommend personal monitors. I mean, I wear them when I'm on the job sites all the time, but yes, evacuate the area. If it's in lockout or if the board is telling you, listen, I sensed a leak, just be aware that there is a possibility of a leak, vacate, ventilate, that sort of thing. Again, A2Ls are closer to A1s than they are to A3s. So the risk for ignition and the charge size is low enough to hopefully not hit that LFL. But just to, again, safety precautions, I would say yes, de-energize, ventilate, and then work on it.
Okay. Another question for Nick. Will we see A2L equipment for commercial industrial use?
Yes, we will. There'll be some more significant changes in the commercial and industrial space. Chillers specifically are going to swap to different refrigerants than R454B, for example. We might see some examples of chillers going down to GWPs of less than 150 in some cases. And yeah, a lot more changes there. And in addition to the changes to refrigerants, there's going to be more mitigation measures in place for some of the industrial and commercial applications. So there's going to be different sorts of leak detection, mitigation, et cetera. And the installation requirements, which I know Jason has mentioned before, are going to be significantly different and kind of more intense for commercial and industrial spaces to make sure that there really is little risk. But if you're in a machine room, you're putting in a chiller or something that's large, commercial, industrial, best practices are still best practices, and follow the laws according to the building code and the manufacturing instructions, and everyone will be fine.
We appreciate your time today here at Johnstone. And again, stay tuned for your local Johnstone local training, review of digital tools, and in training to, again, kind of, if you will, have a successful journey in our transition in technology to A2L equipment. And again, thank you on behalf of all Johnstones, as well as our supplier partners, Chemours, Arkema, Copeland, Johnson Controls, ESCO Institute. Thank you all, and have a great day.